and then do the front page of the survey. And I mentioned it before, it only offers male or female, but if you identify in another way, I apologize, first of all, for the lack of choice, but just write down how you identify, or you could leave it blank too. You know, if there's no rule that says you have to identify your gender.
And we go till 11:15, so
Right.
you can go all the way to the end if you finish earlier.
That's
It's
great.
totally.
That's great. That's good.
A few more. 28, but there's usually 5 or 6.
Uh-huh. That is cool. Wait. No rush. It's just nice to be around living, breathing.
I know.
In the room.
I told them all before because we were doing online. Like I'm nervous, but I'm excited because I've just been like on my own in my house for.
Yeah, oh, I know. Oh, it's nice.
It's nice to be around.
Yeah. That's why we the whole time, I mean, I wish I could help with for people that just, a good thing to know. So I myself on.
I like teaching them. I like taking them.
Oh, that's I like that. I like my whole master's was in synchronous.
Oh, okay. It's
And I'm
convenient.
just like, this is awesome.
Yeah. So convenient.
I need to go to do somewhere, go somewhere, do something. Yeah, to work ahead. Right.
Will you at all vacation on
Yes, yes, I'm at the beach today.
Right.
I'm still working there. No, that's right. Exactly. So, anyway.
I'll hold on to these if anyone wants to leave them.
You are great.
And if you want to let her know.
Yeah, I will.
Catch
Yep,
them.
yep. The catcher in the rye.
Yeah.
That's right. I can't believe your child is a second grader.
I know, 2 in second and 1 in fourth.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that it are the 2 and second.
Yeah.
Gosh, I didn't know it.
Completely fraternal. Nothing like all girls.
Nothing like each other.
Nope, they're even much alike.
There you are. Yeah. So you'll want to read the blue sheet. You'll want to take the first page of the white survey in there. And feel free to write in a different gender or leave that blank if that's right for you today at this moment. So before we get started, just go ahead and read that blue sheet and then take the little survey, just the first page of the white survey underneath it. And if those genders aren't right for you, write a different one or leave it blank. So we'll take just maybe another minute and then we'll get started. Okay, I say let's get started. So you do not have, unless you have rules about taking notes, you do not have to take notes during this. Everything that we're going to talk about is in this booklet here that you have been given. That's yours to keep. Yeah,
If we're still in high school, we switch back off high school, it's not high school.
yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. You can even write in there that you're a high school student if you want. That's a good question. All right. So, do you want me to say, do you want to know all that? Yeah. Okay. All right. As I've been kibitzing with, like, who is this woman who's about that. So my name is Allison Barton, and I'm the coordinator of the Warren College Students Health Center. And I just want to show you, how many of you know that we have a student, knew that we had a student health center? Okay, that's great news. We're right across Raider Walk from this building, and we have a lot of services available there, including mental health services. But we have, it's a doctor's office on campus. So if you haven't visited us, please come by and just check us out. You have access to it because you pay to help. Don't waste your money. Come over and get some condoms or some chapstick, or at the very minimum, right? And then just know that we have doctors, nurses, nurse practitioner, and lots of mental health providers here. Okay, so today we're going to all get trained in QPR. QPR is a suicide prevention program, and it was developed by Dr. Paul Quinnett up in Seattle several years ago now. It gets updated periodically. We just had a language update actually, which was kind of cool. And it was based on a lot of research that tells us that suicide is something that's very preventable, right? But it takes the common person, to be aware of what the signs are and what to do about it. So what's really important, you read this in your little briefing here, but I wanted to make sure everybody knows that you're not going to leave here like a mental health counselor. Nobody expects you to be a counselor or be a psychologist or be, anything like that at the end of this training. The whole purpose of it, kind of like CPR, is for you to identify the signs that somebody's depressed and thinking of suicide, and how to ask the question, are you thinking about suicide? And then what to do based on the person's answer. Okay, so that's the purpose of it. You're going to be a citizen responder. We call it a gatekeeper for suicide prevention. Does that make sense? So some of you, probably some of you in this room, have had experience with thoughts of suicide yourself, or you've known somebody who's killed themselves, or known somebody who's thinking of attempting suicide. You've had that experience in some way, right? And so you may think that everything's fine at the end right now, but as we get into the presentation, you may realize that this is not right for you today. This is not something that you want to listen to, or this may bring up feelings of depression or more suicide thoughts in you, right? This sometimes can trigger those thoughts. So here's the thing. We have again, the Student Health Center over here. What if you decide to get up and leave the room? I want you to check in with Eliza here and let Eliza know what's going on. And she's going to ask you, are you thinking about killing yourself or hurting yourself? Right? She's going to ask you. You can just be getting up to go to the bathroom, but you need to let her know that so we don't worry about you. Does that make sense? Is that a deal there? Okay. So what we can do is take you over to the health center and get some help for you right away if that's your situation today. Is that a deal? You got it? Okay, great. So thank you so much for that. This is not just me talking at you. This is what I'll be asking for some participation too, just so you know. So there's opportunities for you to talk, opportunities to ask questions. Right? Okay, great. So QPR stands for question, persuade, and refer. And let's get started. See if I can get it to. Okay, where are you now? Well, let's just go to the next. Maybe. Why is that so weird? There we go. All right. So I won't be able to walk around like I usually do, but that's okay. Anyway, so these are the goals. So we want you to be able to notice early on, right away, when somebody seems to be having warning signs of suicidal thought. We want you to intervene boldly, really really strongly interact with the person. Refer early, because as we know, if you get into treatment, if you see a mental health provider earlier than later, that can really be effective. And so early professional assessment. And the other thing is we want to make sure that we decrease stigma. And stigma just means that people have a bad attitude about other people with depression or other mental health problems. I've seen the idea of stigma really decrease a lot in the last 8 years that I've been working at Moore Park College. Like, we used to beg people to come and get mental health counseling when I first started working here, and now we're just like kind of booked, right? So I've seen the stigma reduced a lot in that last period of time, but still there's a lot of shame that people feel about suicide or suicide thought or depression or other mental health problems. And so a big part of this is just reducing that, just to know that it's a condition just like other conditions, right? All right, so next, it is not intended to be a form of counseling or treatment. You are not in a counseling session right now. But if you need that, remember that we can take you over to the Student Health Center to get that for you. It's also, the whole idea of it too is to offer you hope so that you know that there's something that can be done about it to prevent suicide. All right, so just a few statistics. These are getting kind of old now. We probably have to update these statistics, but they don't change that much, right? So in the US in 2017, 129 suicides per day, or about 1 every 11 minutes. So it's a fairly common problem. It's the second leading cause of death in ages 10 to 34. The highest risk is middle-aged white males, 45 to 54. So that's a really important thing to realize when when you hear ideas about suicide ideation in people that age. In particular, it's the 10th leading cause of death. Well, it was the 10th leading cause of death in the United States and the 11th in California. COVID kind of knocked it out of the top 10 temporarily. So COVID kills more people, or has killed more people than suicide at this point. All right, so the other thing, so suicide ideation, or the thinking of suicide planning and number of attempts, is the highest though in the 18 to 25 age group, which is your age group, which is why we want to make sure that we present this in colleges, right? That's also the most common age group for all kinds of mental health issues. It's just a really important time in your brain development in this age group there. So we see a lot of mental health issues. White males, American Indians, and Alaska Natives have the highest suicide rates. LGBTQ plus community members attempt suicide 5 times the rate of heterosexual individuals, 8.5 times if there's family rejection. So that's a really key element there. Yeah. And then 20 veterans per day die by suicide each day in the United States. It's about 16% of all suicides. And this is really key here, is that firearms account for almost 51% of all suicides. So this is why, a lot of folks are work on gun laws, right? For exactly this. This is a key element to why people might want to work on reducing guns and reducing access to guns because of that purpose. All right. So undiagnosed and untreated depression is the #1 cause of suicide. And the biggest hint is if somebody says that they're hopeless about something. So let that sink in. Undiagnosed and untreated depression, #1 cause of suicide. Expressing hopelessness is the #1 clue. So these are PET scans, and on the left, we have the PET scan or brain scan of a depressed person. On the right side, we have one that's not depressed. So what are some observations that you can make about that? Yeah.
There's a lot less
In
in the I've never accepted the.
No, I mean, which one? I'm asking a way simpler question than you're hearing.
There's
So
less
that's what
activity
they're
in the-
Yeah, there's less lighting up. This lighting up is activity, way less on this side than on this side. What do you think that means? If there's less activity, how do you think that affects like decision making and reasoning and stuff like that? What do you think?
It would probably cause a person to think a lot less complexity of problem.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting that, A+. Yeah, for sure. So you're not going to be able to really think it through a lot. And so you can see why if somebody's facing a problem and they're already not operating at their optimal because they have depression, that they might not be able to think through all the steps and might not be able to come up with some good solutions, right? So that's a really big deal. And that's because of this alone, that's a reason why that's a number one cause of suicide ideation, suicide thoughts. All right. So, oh, shoot. I should have asked you first. What are some symptoms that you think you might have seen a few of them already? What do you think are some symptoms of depression? Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking of a symptom of if a person's planning suicide, if they are like, if you've seen signs of depression previously, and then like suddenly they're very calm and they,
Oh, yeah.
they feel
Yep.
very like, or they're not worried about anything.
Right. They seem a little like more up than they have been lately. Yeah, for sure. But what are some signs of depression? What's a sign of depression?
Lack of interest in things that they normally found interesting.
Exactly. Yes. What else?
Lack of taking care of themselves.
Yeah. So lack of grooming, maybe not bathing. Yeah.
Too much or too little sleep.
Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting. Like it could be one or like on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? That's a really common one. Yeah.
Isolating themselves from friends.
Yep. What else?
Say what talking about the now.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna say too much or too little eating habits.
Yes, yeah, those are great. Any other ideas that you have? Okay, that's a really good list. All right, so let's see what our our slide says. Okay. So yeah, loss of interest, pleasure, or motivation, heightened emotion. So that's one that we didn't bring up, but sometimes people can be really angry or frustrated or irritable when they normally wouldn't be. Some people are just kind of like that, but if you see a change like that, yeah. Feelings of profound sadness, guilt or shame, fatigue, loss of energy. So we were talking about sleeping a lot or not sleeping much at all, changes in sleeping or eating. And let me just tell you that changes in sleeping or eating can also cause more depression, right? So then you have this kind of a vicious cycle going. That is a very common thing. Right. All right. Moving on, problems concentrating. Remember, we saw our PET scan with the lack of lighting up areas in the brain, withdrawing from friends or family, thoughts of death or suicide or wishing to be dead, helplessness and hopelessness. Remember, we talked about if somebody mentions that they're hopeless about something, that could be a sign. All right. So, and then there are lots of myths about suicide too. So let's talk a little bit about those. No one can stop a suicide. It is inevitable. How many of you have heard that before? Has anybody heard that one before? Yeah, it's a pretty common. Actually, if people get in a crisis, get the help they need, they may never be suicidal again, or they may be suicidal again, but it could stop that, right? That's why we're here, completely why we're here. Confronting a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. That is not true. Okay, asking somebody directly about suicidal intent lowers anxiety, opens up communication, and lowers the risk of an act of self-destruction. This is so true, and it's the hardest thing for most of us to get over, is the idea that asking somebody if they're thinking about killing themselves is going to give them the idea to kill themselves. That is not the case. If they have the idea, they already have the idea. But I can tell you from the many, many times I've had to ask somebody that question, they're either relieved that they don't have that idea, or they're relieved that I asked that they had it if they had it, right? So I've never had somebody get upset with me for asking that. And I've never had somebody say, oh, that's a good idea. I think I'll go do that either, right? I don't want to make light of it. I just want to, that if there's nothing else that you get out of this training, I think that's the key one right there, is that you're not going to give somebody the idea, okay? Only experts can prevent suicide. Well, we wouldn't be here today doing this if we thought that, right? So suicide prevention is everyone's business. Everyone can help prevent this tragedy from happening. All right, some other myths. People considering suicide keep their plans to themselves. So it turns out that most people considering suicide communicate their intent sometimes during the week preceding their attempt. And it might not be, hey, you know what, I think on Tuesday I'm going to kill myself. That is not what it is. But we'll hear about some other clues a little bit later, but just so you know, people do tend to communicate it before. Those who talk about suicide don't do it. That's a really common myth. No, people who talk about suicide may try or even complete an act of self-destruction. Another one, once a person decides to complete suicide, there's nothing anybody can do to stop them. Well, obviously, we wouldn't be here if we thought that, right? So suicide is the most preventable kind of death, and any positive action can save a life. Most of us have heard stories of, you know, an act of kindness given to somebody who was suicidal made them stop wanting to, you know, kill themselves, right? Or I think most of us have heard little stories like that, and they're absolutely true. So even just an act of kindness, even if you don't know that somebody's got these thoughts, is really helpful. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit now about suicide clues and warning signs. There are the more signs and clues that are observed, the greater the risk. So if you're just sleeping a lot right now, that's different from sleeping a lot, withdrawing, not doing the things you like, blah, 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 right? So the more things the person's doing, the more concern there is. All right, so some people are very direct. I've decided to kill myself. I wish I were dead. I'm going to commit suicide. I'm going to end it all. If such and such doesn't happen, I'll kill myself. So a lot, especially in college, you know, if I don't get blah, blah, blah grade, I'm going to kill myself. Or if I don't get into such and such a program, I'm going to kill myself. And my predecessor used to tell the story of a young man that was going to kill himself if he didn't get an A on a math test. And that sounds like not a big deal, but he would need to get an A to get an A in the class, to get into medical school. He had a lot of pressure from his family to do that, to get into that program, to be a doctor. And so for him, that was for most of us, we're like, oh, did I get a B in math? Yay. You know, or a C, yay, oh, I passed, right? But for that person, that high grade, a lot of stuff was pinned on it, including the esteem of his family. So you can see how a little thing to many of us becomes a big thing to other people, right? So those are direct clues. It's really nice if people give us those direct clues, but a lot of times they do not, correct? So there are some indirect clues too. I'm tired of life. I just can't go on. My family would be better off without me. Who would say my family would be better off without me? Can you think of a particular segment of society? Yeah.
LGBT.
Could be, yeah. Like I've caused all these problems for my family. That's one for sure one group. What's another group? Yeah.
Maybe.
Could be, yeah. I've caused so much trouble for my family, and yeah. Any other groups? Yeah.
I don't know if it's a specific group, but anybody who feels like the black sheep of the family.
Yeah, like their families just don't have a lot of respect for them or whatever, or they just keep getting into trouble and the family has to bail them out or whatever. There's one other group that's really common in that commonly has that sentiment.
With other mental illnesses?
Could be people with other mental illnesses. Any other ideas? Yeah,
Well, I was gonna say maybe someone with a physical illness where they can't care.
that could be too. Yeah, somebody with an illness or a physical disability that makes them dependent on family members. Another one that's really common is the elderly. For those reasons, maybe they don't have the resources to live on their own, either money or the ability to live on their own or whatever it is. And that is a really common thing that you might hear from that group too, right? Okay, I just want out. Who cares if I'm dead anyway? I won't be around. This is a biggie. I won't be around much longer. You know, like you think you've made plans with somebody and they said, oh yeah, do whatever you want. Or yeah, I might not be able to make it, or I don't think of it, or making plans to not be somewhere that they where they like to be. It's a really common one. Pretty soon you won't have to worry about me. That's a pretty significant clue, right? So these are kind of indirect verbal clues that people might give you. All right, so there could be behavioral clues. Any previous suicide attempt is a really big one, right? Acquiring a gun or stockpiling pills. Co-occurring depression, moodiness, helplessness. Remember, we talked about lots of the risk factors all together in one. Putting personal affairs in order and giving away any prized possessions. This is a really common one. So my colleague Sharon used to talk about a young woman that was giving away like family heirlooms to people before she died. I just read a book that had a suicide in it, and this guy gave a family heirloom watch to a little boy. And I was reading that going, oh, I wonder if he's thinking about suicide, because that's a really common part of it. When my son was in middle school, he had a friend who killed himself. It was devastating to everyone, but he was giving away his school supplies that he had back then. There were these trapper keepers that every kid wanted. They had like superheroes and stuff on them, and he was giving away like his trapper keeper and his really good pens and all that stuff to his friends. His friends are like, yeah, great, that sounds wonderful. And we didn't know about it. We didn't know he was doing that. The kids were just like, thanks, dude, but it turns out that that's what he was doing. So it can happen at any age, right? Okay. Other things, sudden interest or disinterest in religion. Right? Interesting. So again, both ends of the spectrum. Drug or alcohol abuse relapse after a period of recovery. Very common for two reasons. It could be a clue, but also when one uses, especially alcohol, reduces your inhibitions. So people that are under the influence are much more likely to kill themselves than people that are sober. So that's a really important one to look out for. Unexplained anger, aggression, irritability, seeking revenge, or talking or writing about death. So we get lots of notifications from professors here on campus when they read something that they're concerned about, like an essay or an email or something from students. And I get a lot of those. So I've seen people write about these kinds of things. And then engaging in risky behaviors. What could be a risky behavior that like one of your friends or family members might engage in?
Hooking up with strangers.
Yes, yeah, yes. Hooking up with strangers, way more sex than usual. Yeah, what else? Yeah.
Speeding.
Yes, yes, really. And in fact, a lot of times we think of single car accidents where they run into a hill or a wall or a power pole or whatever, that's probably a suicide. Not always, but there's a high likelihood. Yeah.
Walking super late at night.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So all of those things, lots more alcohol than you usually have, lots more drugs than you usually have, all kinds of things like that are high risk behaviors, behavioral clues. Yeah. And then there are situational things too. So say you have kind of this underlying depression anyway, and then stuff happens, being fired or suspended from school, a recent unwanted move, right? Loss of any major relationship. Sharon also talks about a student that was in class one day and they were watching a video and he just started crying. And that was an unusual behavior for this young man. And so the professor walked him over to the health center and Sharon talked to him. And he was saying that he was really upset that one of his friends had just killed himself. And you know, so Sharon was trying to get some help from him. He was a member of a church with the youth minister. And so he said, oh, well, she said, well, give me the names of all these people so I can have you, can you promise to look in, you know, go check in with this person and so forth. And, you know, after talking to him for a while, you know, he said, I'm okay, I'm going to leave now. Well, what happened was, she was still not sure that he was being straight up with her, right? Like she was really concerned about him. It wasn't quite right. So she called his home and talked to his sister, right? And said, hey, you know, I'm really concerned about this situation going on here. And she said, you know, who was this friend that killed himself? And she goes, that friend didn't kill himself. And she goes, oh gosh, are you guys? So she kind of pieced out that they were having this party that night and he was thinking about killing himself at the party. And so all that to say, when people start to behave in a very strange way, unusual way, right? It's good to kind of pull the string and just get more details about it than you know, you normally would have, right? Okay. So here are other ones: sudden unexpected loss of freedom or fear of punishment. That people that are incarcerated, for example, a lot of times are at high risk for suicide when they first get in jail or before they go to jail. Anticipated loss of financial security. Think about like when the stock market crashed and all the people jumping out of windows. That was a really common thing that happened, right? Just because of loss of financial security and loss of financial status, right? Fear of becoming a burden to others. We talked about that lots of different ways, right? Humiliation, bullying, or exploitation. That is the thing that happens to kids. It's very sad with the social media and all those kinds of things. And then loss of a cherished therapist, counselor, or teacher. I remember when I was in elementary school, we had the special ed teacher at our school actually died because she used her gas stove to heat the house and the pilot light blew out. And she and her family all died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And this girl that was in my neighborhood was in her class and she was very suicidal and had to be, you know, just kind of cared for. And it was at a time when we didn't even know about QPR and all of that stuff. So it was pretty amazing that she survived that situation because she was pretty capable of doing what she wanted to do. That was part of her issue. All right. Okay, so now we're going to move. So we've talked about kind of the background of depression and suicide thoughts. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what we mean when we say QPR, ask a question, save a life. So first of all, we're talking about Q. We're going in the Q part now, asking the question. So these are tips for asking if somebody's thinking about killing themselves. If in doubt, don't wait, just ask the question. Just like if somebody were about to get up and leave the room, we're going to ask them, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Right? We're not going to just let you go off and do whatever. We need to really check in with you. So that's why we do that. If the person is reluctant, be persistent. If they don't want to answer your question and they're evading it, really stick with it. Talk to the other thing is talk to the person alone. Try to have a little bit of privacy when you talk to the person, because sometimes they'll be more likely to be forthcoming if they have some privacy, right? Allow them to talk freely. Give yourself plenty of time. You don't want to say, oh, I'm going to just stop over there and real quick ask this question and then dash off to my next class. That's not really going to be effective, right? And then have your resources ready. In your book, at the back of your little booklet, you have a little card with resources. We recommend that students keep this in a wallet or a backpack or something like that, that you have handy. You can take a picture of it if you have a cell phone. And just have those resources handy. I like to even put the numbers, I have all those numbers in my phone so I can share a contact or whatever, right? So that's a really important strategy to have all of that handy. And remember, how you ask the question is less important than that you do ask it. So we're going to talk about a few little style things for asking the question. So there's a less direct approach if you feel a little nervous about it at first. And that is, have you been unhappy lately? Kind of working up to it? Are you have you been very unhappy lately? Have you been so unhappy that you've been thinking about ending your life? For children, you could say, do you ever wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? That's a different way of saying it. At some ages, children don't really have a good concept of death, but they do have a concept of death, right? So you can see how you're sort of slowly approaching it. And sometimes that feels like the right way to do it. Sometimes that feels like the right way to do it. There's a direct approach. You know, when people are hurting or as upset as much as you are, they sometimes wish they were dead. And I'm wondering if you're feeling that way. Or are you thinking of killing yourself? I used to sort of sneak up on it and then ask the question, ease into it, but now I'm way more direct. Because I just think that that little jolt is a good jolt. Sometimes. If you can't ask the question, find somebody who can. If you feel really uncomfortable, or you might feel comfortable with your friends, but maybe you don't feel comfortable asking a parent or a loved one or whatever, or vice versa, right? So if you don't feel comfortable, find someone who is comfortable with it. All right, so this is how you don't do it though. You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? You wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? Right? Suicide is a dumb idea. Surely you're not thinking about suicide. Why are these ways problematic?
It's super judgmental of a person who's already feeling like outcasted.
Yeah. What else?
I was gonna say it seems belittling.
It's belittling. Yeah. What else? Yes. All three of you are correct. Absolutely. Like, oh no, I wouldn't do that. Right. So you don't want to ask it that way. Okay, now the next one is persuade. So you're going to try to persuade the person to stay alive, essentially, right? So you're going to listen to the problem, give them your full attention. Suicide is not the problem. It's only their solution to a perceived insoluble problem. I have a really good friend who's a therapist who always refers to it as a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And that's a really good way of putting it. Like, there are so many other things you can do that will solve this problem. Don't rush to judgment. So we're not going to use those do not ask this way strategies, right? And we're going to offer hope in any form. And it could be something like, I'm going to help you get help. That's hope in any form, right? There are other jobs you could do, other programs you could, like 1,000 things that you could say, depending on who the person is, who you are, what, those kinds of things. All right. It works best when you do the following. So you want to persist in statements that suicide is not a good solution and suggest that better alternatives can be found. Right? I'm sure there's something we can do about this. Let's talk a little bit more about it, see what help we can get you. So focusing on healthy solutions to problems, not the suicide solution. You're having problems with bills. Let's see what we can do to solve that problem. Right? Accept the reality of the person's pain, but offer alternatives. And you can say something like, that must feel so terrible. I can see that you're really hurting right now. Let's see if there are other things that we can do, because we miss you, right? Show respect. Yeah. Collaborate with the person to assure them of your ongoing support and offer hope in any form, in any way. I'm sure there are people that would miss you. I would miss you, those kinds of things, right? All right. If they tell you that they've had treatment before and it has not worked, this is really a good one. Ask them, what if this time it does work? So it turns out with therapy, a lot of people don't mesh well with the first or even second or third therapist that they've had. But when they go back to it, maybe they're more ready. Or maybe they just click, right? We've all had people in our lives that we either click with or we don't click with in the student therapist. So this is a really important element to this persuasion. Yeah. And now this is key. We're not keeping you with that person doing the whole job. This is where we refer, right? So suicidal people often feel they cannot be helped, so you may have to do a little bit more. The best referral involves taking the person directly to someone who can help. Ask, will you go with me to help? And where can you go when you're during, 8 to 5 hours, Monday through Thursday, 8 to 12 on Friday? Where could you go to get somebody help here on campus? Yeah, you could walk them over. We have people walking students over all the time. And we have students doing that a lot, students for other students. It's not just professors, it's students doing it for other students. Citing this course as the reason they were aware, right? All right, so, okay. The next best referral is getting a commitment from them to ask, will you help me get you help? This is where calling the suicide hotline with them. You can do that with them. You can say, hey, suicide hotline, I am sitting here with my friend who is thinking about killing himself, herself, themselves. Can you help me out here? And they'll have you pass the phone over to the person. That is a very effective way. And it's a 24/7 way. It's always available. You don't have to be on campus, right? It's a great way to do it. All right. Whoops. The third best referral is to give the information. I'm going to share this link with you. I'm going to share this information with you, right? What can we do to keep you safe for now is another really good strategy. How can I take you somewhere? Is there somebody I can call? Can I sit here with you for a while until we figure out what to do? Those are things that we can do to keep the person safe for now, right? So your willingness to listen and help can rekindle hope and make all the difference. And let me say this again, your willingness to listen and help can rekindle hope and make all the difference. We've heard all of the stories about somebody just being kind, and that was all it took to help change the person's mind. Yeah.
Students, I normally talk about like getting them help and somewhere to get help. And thing I run into is like, I will pay my rent on the treatment.
Yeah, no, that's it. No. So what's really good is I'm going to share some resources with you a little bit later that I'll want you to take a picture if you have a phone or just jot them down that are unique to our county and LA County that can really help us. So we have a lot of outpatient help. We have a lot of really good resources and really good people to respond to these kinds of, you're 100% correct, especially for drug treatment. And we said before about drugs is that they lower the inhibitions and make people more likely to suffer from depression and more likely to kill themselves too, if they're having those thoughts, right? Hence the commitment to sobriety is important. It really is a key element to people with depression, and alcohol use can lower the depression threshold and make you more likely to be depressed, right? So we really want to help people stay sober if that's their issue. Alrighty, so these are the some of the services that I was telling you about earlier. If you want to take your phone out and take a picture now, that's great. We have national suicide hotlines. These are in your little book too. For veterans, you can call the suicide hotline and press 1, and that will get you into the veterans hotline. Trevor Lifeline is great for LGBTQ plus folks, and they have some really great resources. Another great idea for anyone who maybe somebody isn't suicidal, but they're still down or they're still having some mental health issues. The crisis text line is great. It's 24/7, folks. There are trained volunteers on the other end of that. You can text the word courage and they'll know you go to Moore Park College. They won't know who you are or anything like that, but that helps us with like our statistics and stuff. But they will respond to you. And so sometimes, you're not conveniently feeling depressed at 8 a.m. to make an appointment, right? You're inconveniently depressed at 4 a.m. though, right? And so that's why that's really good. It's a 24/7 every day of the year, even holidays. There's somebody that can respond to you there. And for a lot of people, that's just enough to get you over the edge, right? In a good way. And then the Ventura County Behavioral Health has crisis teams. That's a group number to call. And that's where you would find some of the great like outpatient resources and those sorts of things. Absolutely. And then there's the D.D. Hirsch Foundation in LA County. That's another. So if you're in LA County, the person is in LA County. That's a great place to call too. Right. So some wonderful resources in our two counties. Yeah.
That sometimes students will ask me when they did today, but what can you expect to fall into those trainings?
Yeah, no. So with the suicide hotline, like for example, if you're sitting there with your friend and you call and say, hey, I've got this friend who's suffering from suicide thoughts, and I just need your help, and I'm helping my friend call. They'll say, yep, absolutely, pass the phone over to me. So that's one thing you can expect. You can expect pretty quick response usually to the crisis text line. The veterans is part of the suicide hotline. It's great. My experience with them is that they have responded very quickly also. I have not called the Trevor hotline before. Has anybody in here called Trevor before that they could share what that experience has been like? I know they've been very responsive in non-emergency situations. So I suspect that they're I should call and just get an idea for you for the next time. But they have a lot of really great resources in general, for the LGBTQ plus community and allies. Any other question? Was that answered the question? Okay. So next. So here's another big deal. This is a really important one. So this is a safety guideline. We want to make sure that you're considering the person's safety and your safety, right? So if you notice that the person has a weapon or an object that can be used as a weapon, or if you're speaking over the phone with a person who expresses an intent to harm, like you're not there with them, right? If there's an overdose of pills or drugs, or there's signs of physical injury, or the person's passed out, right? If you're confronted with a hostile or armed person, any of these things, call 911. Just call 911. We don't want you to get yourself hurt or killed in the service of helping somebody else. Calling 911 is they would have the skill and ability to help, right? They'll ask, are you safe? They'll ask what's going on, what's happening, what kind of weapon they'll even ask you if the person has a weapon. You won't even have to remember what to say. They'll ask you all these questions. And then sometimes they'll even ask if it seems to be a mental health issue or whatever. I do want you to know that soon, I thought it was going to be by this presentation, but I think COVID has kind of messed it up. We're going to soon have a mental health version of 911. It's not working now, but pretty soon. We're waiting with bated breath for that, because that's going to be really a good strategy to be able to call for mental health emergencies, right? Does everybody understand that? Don't put yourself in harm's way. Same with CPR, same thing. If you would be harmed by doing CPR, you shouldn't do it. Okay, so since almost all efforts to persuade someone to live instead of attempt suicide will be met with agreement and relief, don't hesitate to get involved and take the lead. Don't hesitate to ask, let me get you some help, right? It's almost always is useful. Okay, so for effective QPR, say, I want you to live, I'm on your side, let's get through this, get others involved. Who are your significant others? Do you go to a church or a synagogue or a mosque or what? Do you have a spiritual leader that would be helpful? Or, you know, a family member or a physician, something like that, right? Join the team, offer to help, say, hey, you know, I'm here sitting with this person, I can get them to you, I get whatever it is that you're able to do to help, that's what you should do. And then follow up after it happens. That's what I do when I talk to students who are depressed or feeling suicidal ideation. I will call them up later or follow up with an email or something and just say, hey, I'm just checking in with you. How are you doing? Those kinds of things, right? Does that make sense? All right, so now we are going to practice. So we have a practice scenario for you to do. And so what I want you to do, if you would please, is to get into pairs. So move around so you're in a pair. And then I'm gonna give one person in the pair. One person is going to be the gatekeeper or the QPR practicer, and the other person is going to be the troubled individual. So when I give you your papers, you're going to kind of read the whole paper, whichever role you're playing. And then we'll take about 5 minutes, right, to act out this kind of role play with each other, right? And then we'll get back together to kind of debrief. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So if you can actually physically move your bodies. This isn't, Zoom. So are you two? You guys and then are you guys?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. A lot of people like it. Yeah.
People
I
will
think
help
that's
her.
good. That's really great.
And then are you hearing who are you hearing? Okay, so do you want to do like a three? All right, so we'll have 2 helpers and a happy. Guys.
Reason that you're feeling overwhelmed. I hope with about my future. And I believe I'm becoming a burden to my family. So close to me moved away. I thought years ago killed. I enjoy I don't feel like I'm anymore. I don't work with.
I think you should get
feel better about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Hopefully we're, it feels like we're almost done. Not to be pessimistic. I had to cut.
Will you let them walk me?
Sorry, I'm gonna take my friend to go away. I don't know how to help me. I know.
About what you would be missing out.
I feel like it's
I get it, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's like the final
Time's up. So, how was that? How did that go for you? Were you able to ask the question, get to the suicide question? How many of you were able to get, your group was able to, yeah. How many of you found it really uncomfortable to ask that question? So, Eliza and I were just saying that the more you ask this, when you have opportunities to ask it, the less awkward it feels to ask. And troubled persons, how was that experience for you? Did it feel kind of constructive? Did it feel kind of like a resistance for you?
Isn't it difficult to emulate that sort of role out there? Like, I don't really know.
You don't have those feelings, yeah.
Yeah, I would say so.
But for some of us, it really comes close to home almost always in every class. There's somebody who says, oh, I just lost my dog, or I just had this experience, or whatever, right? So on any given day, it really hits home for some people. So I know so the person that was the troubled person, you may or may not actually have these feelings right now, but how did it, if you could imagine, how did it feel to you to have the person ask that question? Any want to share how they felt being asked the question? Yeah.
I just feel like it's such a scary thing to answer yes to. So it's like, what am I gonna end up in, like on a psych hold or?
Oh, I
You know
see.
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think I'm
Yeah.
on therapy session.
So let me just say that, depending upon your situation, like if we would ask a few more questions when we get to the therapist, right? Here on campus or wherever, they'll ask, how ready are you? Like, do you have the means? Do you have, do you have a plan? All of those things. And if you don't have those, then the strategy will be different for you. than if it was this other situation where it's something that's in have a loaded gun and it's in your car and, you know, those kind of things, right? So, as the asker, don't be too worried about that kind of stuff. And if you're having these feelings right now, if you've experienced these things right now, let me just say that, yeah, it's a lot of effort, but it's the sooner you get down to business, the better it is for you, and the less time you feel sick. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So what other takeaways from this experience are there? Yeah.
And then one of the things that I was having trouble with, even though I don't really look at it, is like, I feel like I'm something nervous. And I feel like something like that could come across for someone who's really struggling. Mine's like make it seem like I'm not taking them seriously. Like, what are some tips that you have for individuals that are asking questions, like how they can compose themselves?
That is a really good question. I think first of all, that we all feel like it's a little bit weird in the role. And that does make us a little, sometimes a little giggly, you know, like, oh, I can't even do this kind of thing. But even if you feel weird while you're doing the role play, it does prepare you. Role playing prepares you for asking that, because the words have come out of your mouth and your brain remembers it. Your mouth moved in a certain way and you said those words, and it becomes easier each time you say it. We were just talking about that. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I don't want, you can say, just be honest, I feel really nervous right now because I'm worried about you. And I'm taking you very serious. Just say those words. I'm taking you very seriously. Make eye contact. Say if I care about you. So just I want to make sure you this. Did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I've been in that position where I've had to ask people, and
Yeah.
I always laugh when I'm uncomfortable, and the people who know me have to say, not making light of it. It's just, like my
Exactly.
therapist says, laughing is an outburst, just like crying.
Exactly. That's a really good way to put it. But just, you know, I think if you just make eye contact and just say, hey, you know, I want you to know I'm taking this very seriously and I'm so worried about you. So you can really have kind of an emotional reaction to it. Thank you. Great questions, great answers. Any other takeaways? Yeah.
These are takeaways, but I have like some questions on
Yeah.
how to approach a situation. So if you are friends with, like, say, a minor,
Yeah.
and they are still living with their parents, and their parents are like very against like medication or like therapy, how would you be able to get them?
So you can contact any of those resources, the treatment there. So there are a lot of rules about mental health services for minors that they can actually get services themselves. They have to want them, they have to agree to them on it. But that's true on campus here too. You can get mental health services and other kinds of, like, if you've been sexually assaulted, for example, or something like that, you have rights, even as a minor, if the parent is not going to be helpful. So does that answer your question? And you can explain that to any of those people that you call and just say, this is a person who's 17 or 16 or whatever it is. And their mom is not going to be okay with this. So I'm just letting you know, because it's still worth saving their life. We're helping you through it. That's a great question. Any other Senator people?
I had another one, but I
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what, if you go like this, sometimes it will help you remember that. A little memory mover. What other? Yeah.
I have a question about being in the role of like asking the question.
Yeah.
I had like an experience like with someone in a manic episode who was threatening suicide, and that's very difficult to approach
Yeah.
because they're very sporadic and
Yeah.
hostile. So like, how do you deal with
Yeah.
tensions?
It's super duper hard. Did you have a?
No, I was.
Okay, so the best thing to do is be as calm as you can in yourself, because you can make yourself quiet and low and just talk in the calmest possible voice as you can. Make eye contact. Be very clear with the person. I'm very concerned about you. Your behavior is frightening you, threatening you. I just want you to try to calm. I'm going to be calm. gonna need to call some help for you, that, those kind of things. But you, when and yelling at the person only stimulates that kind of, the manic side of that behavior. So being as calm yourself as you can and having your resources handy and ready are all really important strategies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, de-escalate, calm affairs, calm down, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've been in situations with friends who I know they'd probably be upset with me if I like, even call 911.
Yeah.
So I was concerned about them.
Yeah.
Is 911 the resource you go to if your friend is like at imminent risk of harming themselves? And
I personally, it depends on what's the, remember we have the 911, if they have a loaded gun, or they're threatening you in some way, or they have a knife or whatever, that's a 911. But if they're just telling you, not just, if they're telling you that they don't seem like they're gonna, it's imminent, or they're gonna hurt you, or anything like that, then I would do the suicide hotline. That's another thing.
I have another question.
Yes.
I have a friend who multiple people actually who needed mental health services, but one of them is getting services now and it's $200 a session and that their deductibles
Yeah,
way high.
yeah, yes. So this isn't a reason not to call the suicide hotline. Fear for the cost of therapy is not a reason not to call, so I just want to make sure everyone knows that. Ventura County is great at working on a sliding scale for people. If they have no money, it doesn't cost anything, it costs very little. We have Caloo that has really inexpensive or free services for people. So there are a lot of resources. And if the person is a student here at one of our colleges, we also have this awesome case manager who helps them find services they can afford where they live. So there are lots of options for people. So don't not call because you don't think they can afford therapy, right? That's a great question. What other questions, comments? Yeah.
What if the person thinks that by telling you about like them wanting to commit suicide, that would be like burdening you, and so they would,
It would be like burdening you.
yeah.
Burdening.
Burdening you. Yeah, you know what? I would say it's not a burden. No. Yeah, I care about you and I want you to be healthy and well and safe. That's what I care about right now. It's more of a burden worrying about you than helping you. Anything like that, just be very sincere. It's not a burden, right? It's not a burden if you're helping somebody else. Anybody have any other ideas for that situation? That's how I would just respond like that. What would you say?
So I know personally, I am the person who feels burdened,
Yeah.
but I feel like if somebody related to it, it was more like, I don't know, like mutual burden almost.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like they send me with a problem and I burden them with my problem. It's kind of like a mutual thing happening. So it's not like, oh, I'm the only one giving here.
Right. So it's mutual burden.
Yeah.
And so that's like, oh, don't worry about it. I burden you too. That's a perfect strategy. So anything like that is a really good idea, right? Yeah.
Like, just reminding the person that you care about them a lot, that you.
Yes.
Even for them, just like, not even like when they're in that like those mindset, but just like, in general. That's really something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was gonna say, even with them like being mad, I'd rather someone be mad at me.
Yes.
The alternative would be more of a burden than would be more.
Correct. Yes. And then you were just saying that. Yeah. It's like the burden of not having done something when you do something about it. It's so much worse. So even thinking about it from your own perspective, right? Yeah. A+ job, you guys. You did a nice work today. So what I would like you to do now is if you could pass forward the salmon and white pages. And on your way out, we have your certificates. So you'll grab a certificate